Hi. Happy Friday. Happy Black Friday. Happy puppy. Waggy tail puppy. He's like, you're talking to your computer? That means I get snacks. I saw BBAB in the chat. BBAB. Happy puppy. No worries. How have you been? We have read the prologue and 2 chapters of Castle of Wizardry, which is the 4th book of the Belgariad. Since finishing, I grabbed too many treats. I wasn't thinking it was on autopilot. Oh, you did! Well, that's very nice. Okay, Ben, let me back up. You don't get treats when you're standing on my leg because then you don't chew. Oh. Which hand's it gonna be in? Which hand? Is it that one? Is it that one? Or is it this one? Which hand's it in? You gotta pick one. Which one? That one? That one? That's the one! You're not scared. Brave! Brave BBAB! A weird, slightly deformed treat. Looks like it got caught in the cutter. Ben doesn't care. Oh, oh dear. Oh, that you did go to the ER. Oh, oh dear. That's that doesn't sound like a fun evening. Well, I'm glad you are okay. And how was your actual Thanksgiving? Did you have a nice dinner? Yeah, that's fair, yeah. Gib, Gib treat. Gib treat. Gib, Gib treat. Alright. Yeah, yeah. Canada's Thanksgiving is not in November. We do have a Thanksgiving. But yes. Which was subdued for us when we had ours. What with the goings on in my family. And I imagine Christmas is probably going to be similar. Does that look crooked? I think that's a little crooked, isn't it? Yeah, whatever. Puppy tail. You want to come up? Of course you don't. Who am I kidding? What about for a treat? You want to come up? Up? Up and get a treat. If you come up, you get a treat. Yeah, come all the way up though. Jump! Jump up! Jump up! Jump up! As he runs away. No, over here, Ben. Wait. I know you can jump. Yeah, you can jump up. Come on. No, I'm leaving. It's so strange because normally he loves to jump up and sometimes even onto laps, but when I'm sitting at the computer, it's like I don't know, he's got some kind of reluctance. He gets afraid and just leaves entirely if I try to get him to jump up on my lap here. You think it's the chair? It could be. Too spiny. Spinny. Sharkies, you have an uncanny knack for showing up right when I go, where are the Sharkies? I wonder if they're okay. I wonder if they're coming today. I just clicked on the chat users to see if I could see you there. And that's exactly, you showed up right on cue. And I feel like it happens surprisingly frequently that way. It's a great talent. How is your Friday going? This is currently doing a phone survey. Well, all right then. Does that mean that the junior Sharkies are there as well? Very nice, quiet, happy Thanksgiving. Oh, that's sweet. That's nice. Stormy is envious of your bacon. That's understandable. I had a little bit of bacon in the pasta that I had for dinner tonight. Sort of a fettuccine with a pesto cream sauce pasta with a little bit of chorizo and chicken and bacon. Not a lot of any of those. And a very small amount of broccoli. Phone survey. Hopefully it's not too obnoxious. So, the Belgariad, Book 4, Castle of Wizardry. It's had an interesting start so far. Just for our friend BBAB, here's our map. Which is kind of awkward to, it's too big for the camera. I could do it sideways. But that, fits well, but doesn't, doesn't particularly line up with the way that people read things normally. Oh, I see. Yeah, those sometimes they've got a shorter version of those, and sometimes they are not so short. Sometimes they've got the really long ones. It's not focusing on the map super well, but this is the map of Algaria, where our heroes are not there right now. They are still inside the borders of Cthulmurgos, where they are on the run from basically every Murgo that could be mustered. Silk is currently in the process of trying to play a little trick on them by leaving them a big old trail to follow that our heroes are going to then divert from, I think is the plan. Something like that. So they are currently right down here, and they're heading, I think, north. Puppy really wants more treats. Puppy is a glutton. Isn't that right? Are you a little glutton? Are you going to lick your lips to subtly indicate to me that you want more treats? I saw that. Did you all see that? It can happen at the worst times. The last time I received a StatsCan survey was, I think, a few years ago at this point. But I had heard that they were doing another round of them. Soulful little eyes with his built-in makeup. Makes him look extra sad. Extra, feed me. He looks so sad. But if I reach over here, it doesn't look quite so sad. Does he? Yeah, he still looks pretty sad. What's that? What's that? Is that your prey? Give. Give. Not letting go. Oh, you got a piece of it. I mean, sometimes he doesn't even finish his dinner. Never fed ever. So, in chapter 2, our boy Garion was still being quite distracted by the song of the Orb of Aldur. Probably be back. Relg, fanatic zealot Relg, and Taiba, the, at this point, ex-slave, had a big old row. They are not getting along in the traditional sense. And Taiba discovered a way to scare Relg off. I would say a at least slightly unconventional method. For those who missed it, Relg is sort of an extreme religious type. Lots of opinions about sin and purity and all that. And Taiba gave him the old wah, which caused Relg to kind of bolt. So that was something. And then our group came under a magical attack from the, I think they called them the Hierarchs of Rakthol, maybe? Some kind of council type, magical council of bad guys. The Hierarchs control the Grolims now that Katuchik's dead. Grolims. Grolims. Not. Yeah. Close. Pretty close. Also, of course, our group, decided upon by Dernick, has named the young boy Errand. Errand, since that seems to be the only word that he knows, and he responds to it. Right. Not like either of those. So according to Polgara, the attack was directed at Errand. The Hierarchs figure if they kill the boy, then our group has no way of transporting the orb. Transporting the orb, it seems like a weird gray area at this point. Because apparently you can't touch it or you'll die. But they've put it in a pouch. Can they just carry the pouch themselves? It seems like Errand has to carry the pouch, but for at least a moment Dernick did, and there wasn't a problem. And there's still that question of how what Brand did during the fight against Torak thousands of years ago with his shield. I'm still really not sure about how that worked. But yes, so this attack came directed at Errand, and Polgara declared that she needed to completely devote herself to defending him. And in doing so, she put up a big ol' shield, a magical shield, which basically cut her off from any, like, sound. Presumably, it seems like it's not an opaque shield, everyone can see through it, and I think she can move with it. But verbally, she is cut off from the rest of the group. And Silk declared that that meant Garion was in charge. Garion handled this by basically saying, okay, well, we'll just keep doing what we were doing then. And that's pretty much where we left off. So what do you think, Sharky? Should we wait for Mrs. Sharky? Carry on then. Oh. We can delay a little bit further. So we've just found out that we've got another house showing tomorrow at 12:30, which is interesting because it's the same guy as the previous one, who was a little odd in the first place. Not necessarily that the guy was odd, but it seemed like the house showing was a little weird, in a few ways. And also, normally when we get house showings booked, we find out more than like a day in advance usually. But this guy last time we found out the same day that he wanted a viewing, and then we just found out within the past, like, half an hour that he wants another viewing tomorrow at 12:30, so it's like, he's not giving us a lot of leeway. But it's a good sign anyways, because this time, hopefully his wife will be coming with him, and then assuming that she also likes our house, it sounds like they'll probably put down an offer on it. We are a little worried that they're going to, like, really try to lowball us, because it sounded like he was saying to our real estate agent that he was probably going to put in a lower offer. Kind of odd that he just said that straight up. And we're already at a point where we think we've priced our house at a pretty reasonable place for the market and for, you know, what it is. So we don't really want to go much lower. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not extremely confident about it. But, I don't know. Better than not receiving an offer either, I guess. Well, if it's an offer that we just, like, if we can't reach an agreed price, then I guess it's not better than not receiving an offer. It's worse because it wastes our time. But we'll see. We'll see what he offers, what they offer. It's also interesting because this guy has already sold his house and is looking to buy, like, to have somewhere to move into, I guess. So, theoretically, if he does place an offer, he might want to take possession of the place very quickly. So if that happens, we might be trying to move out of here in a real hurry, especially because we got a trip to Mexico from the December 4th to December 11th. So I really don't know how this is going to end up working out. It's going to be kind of, we might end up scrambling. Oh, yeah. How's that going, by the way? Because you were replacing your trashed vehicle, right? Hopefully that hasn't been too stressful. You have a car! Oh, good! I'm happy to hear it. Yeah, because today's the 25th. So tomorrow's the 26th, which puts us, like, it'll be a week and 1 day from tomorrow where we leave for Mexico. A week and 1 day is a pretty short amount of time. Yeah, I don't know. This is, I'm a little nervous. A little nervous that this guy's gonna place an offer and say he wants to buy the house, like, right away or something. Which, you know, if it were for a price we could agree on, that would be a positive thing. I'd be happy to sell finally. Involved some bad timing. Oh boy. That's true. Like, yeah, is he going to want to move out of his place and into this place? Because if that's the case, is he going to want to move in for, like, December 1st or something like that? Because that would be some last-minute hiring of movers to get all of our stuff into storage in, like, 2 days or something like that. If that ended up being the case. Take what we need to Farmhouse's parents' house or something, and just who knows? Yeah, we'll find out. Anyways, books. Yeah, books. I see the reflection of a puppy. Right here. I see a puppy. Right here. What are you doing here? You want more treats? You want more treats? Do I need to, like, bring your bed over here so you can lay down? Let me grab a bed for you. There. Here you go. Good boy. Good boy, get the treat. Alright, we should get started. So, in my copy, which does not line up with everyone else's, we are on page 29. Feels wrong reading out of this copy. Like, this isn't the right book. Need to adjust so that we can see the puppy. The puppy butt right there. My legs are in the way. Can I lower my seat? What? Go to your bed. Lower it a little. No? Okay. Ready, everyone? So we are in Castle of Wizardry, Part 1, Algaria, Chapter 3. There was the faintest sliver of a moon low over the horizon as they started out across the black sand of the wasteland in the biting chill. Are you listening? Is that... Get comfortable. Come on. Lay down. No, he's not having it. He's like, give me snacks or give me couch. Garion felt distinctly uncomfortable in the role Silk had thrust upon him. He knew that there had been no need for it, since they all knew where they were going and what they had to do. If any kind of leadership had actually been required, Silk himself was the logical one to provide it. But instead, the little man had placed the burden squarely on Garion's shoulders, and now seemed to be watching intently to see how he would handle it. There was no time for leadership or even discussion when, shortly after midnight, they ran into a party of Murgos. There were 6 of them, and they came galloping over a low ridge to the south and blundered directly into the middle of Garion's party. Barak and Mandaralin reacted with that instant violence of trained warriors, their swords whistling out of their sheaths to crunch with steely ringing sounds into the mail-shirted bodies of the startled Murgos. Even as Garion struggled to draw his own sword, he saw one of the black-robed intruders tumble limply out of his saddle, while another, howling with pain and surprise, toppled slowly backward, clutching at his chest. There was a confusion of shouts and shrill screams from terrified horses as the men fought in the darkness. One frightened Murgo wheeled his mount to flee, but Garion, without even thinking, pulled his horse in front of him, sword raised to strike. The desperate Murgo made a frantic swing with his own weapon, but Garion easily parried the badly aimed swipe and flicked his blade lightly, whip-like, across the Murgo's shoulder. There was a satisfying crunch as the sharp edge bit into the Murgo's mail shirt. Garion deftly parried another clumsy swing and whipped his blade again, slashing the Murgo across the face. all the instruction he had received from his friends seemed to click together into a single, unified style that was part Cherrick, part Arendish, part Algar, and was distinctly Garion's own. This style baffled the frightened Murgo, and his efforts became more desperate. But each time he swung, Garion easily parried and instantly countered with those light, flicking slashes that inevitably drew blood. Garion felt a wild, surging exultation boiling in his veins as he fought, and there was a fiery taste in his mouth. Then Relg darted in out of the shadows, jerked the Murgo off balance, and drove his hook-pointed knife up under the man's ribs. The Murgo doubled over sharply, shuddered, then fell dead from his saddle. "What did you do that for?" Garion demanded without thinking. "That was my Murgo!" Barak, surveying the carnage, laughed, his sudden mirth startling in the darkness.
"He's turning savage on us, isn't he?"
"His skill is noteworthy, however," Mandaralin replied approvingly. Garion's spirits soared. He looked around eagerly for someone else to fight, but the Murgos were all dead. "Were they alone?" he demanded, somewhat out of breath. "I mean, were there any others coming along behind them? Maybe we should go look." "We do want them to find our trail, after all," Silk reminded him. "It's up to you, of course, Garion, but if we exterminate all the Murgos in the area, there won't be anyone left to report our direction back to Rakthol, will there?" "Oh," Garion said, feeling a little sheepish. "I forgot about that." "You have to keep the grand plan in view, Garion, and not lose sight of it during these little side adventures. Maybe I got carried away. A good leader can't afford to do that." "All right," Garion began to feel embarrassed. "I just wanted to be sure you understood, that's all." Garion didn't answer, but he began to see what it was about Silk that irritated Belgarath so much. Leadership was enough of a burden without these continual sly comments from the weasel-faced little man to complicate things. Wow, Sharkies. So, that's an interesting side of Garion, isn't it? Getting praise on his swordsmanship from Mandaralin of all people, that's not nothing. But he's definitely enjoying the thrill of the fight, isn't he? That was my Murgo. "Are you all right?" Taiba was saying to Relg, with a strange note of concern in her voice. The Ilgo was still on his knees beside the body of the Murgo he had killed.
"Leave me alone,"
he told her harshly. "Don't be stupid. Are you hurt? Let me see."
"Don't touch me!"
He cringed away from her outstretched hand.
"Belgarion, make her get away from me!"
One of 3 people that calls him that. Not counting, gods. Garion groaned inwardly. "What's the trouble now?" he asked.
"I killed this man,"
Relg replied.
There are certain things I have to do. Certain prayers. Purification. She's interfering.
Garion resisted an impulse to swear. Please, Taiba, he said as calmly as he could. Just leave him alone. I just wanted to see if he was all right, Taiba answered, a bit petulantly. I wasn't hurting him. She had an odd look on her face that Garion could not begin to understand. As she stared at the kneeling Olgo, a curious little smile flickered across her lips. Without warning, she reached her hand out toward him again. Relg shrank back.
No!
He gasped. Taiba chuckled, a throaty, wicked little sound, and walked away, humming softly to herself. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Mom! Garion, make her stop!
Oh, boy. After Relg had performed his ritual of purification over the dead Murgo's body, they remounted and rode on. The sliver of moon stood high overhead in the chill sky, casting a pale light down on the black sands. And Garion looked about constantly as he rode, trying to pick out any possible dangers lurking ahead. He glanced frequently at Aunt Pole, wishing that she were not so completely cut off from him, but she seemed to be totally absorbed in maintaining her shield of will. She rode with Erend pulled closely against her, and her eyes were distant, unfathomable. Blah, blah. Garion looked hopefully at Belgarath, but the old man, though he looked up from his doze at times, seemed largely unaware of his surroundings. Garion sighed, and his eyes resumed their nervous scrutiny of the trail ahead. They rode on through the tag-end of night in the biting chill, with the faint moonlight about them, and the stars glittering like points of ice in the sky above. Suddenly, Garion heard a roaring in his mind, a sound that had that peculiar echo to it. And the shield of force surrounding Aunt Pole shimmered with an ugly orange glow. He jerked his will in sharply and gestured with a single word. He had no idea what word he used, but it seemed to work. Like a horse blundering into a covey of feeding birds, his will scattered the concerted attack on Aunt Pole and Erend. Mr. Hank, I presume? A covey of feeding birds. Covey. Covey? Covey. Like a horse blundering into a covey of feeding birds. Covey? It's a little bit of a weird description, isn't it? It's very visual. Paints a picture. His will scattered the concerted attack on Aunt Pole and Errand. Feeding on magic. There had been more than one mind involved in the attack. He sensed that, but it seemed to make no difference. He caught a momentary flicker of chagrin and even fear as the joined wills of Aunt Pole's attackers broke and fled from him. Partridge. Not bad, the voice in his mind observed. A little clumsy, perhaps, but not bad at all. It's the first time I ever did it, Garion replied. I'll get better with more practice. Don't get overconfident, the voice advised dryly, and then it was gone. He was growing stronger, there was no doubt about that. The ease with which he had dispersed the combined wills of that group of Grolims Aunt Pole had called the Hierarchs amazed him. We've already hit that square on the bingo sheet a second time. He faintly began to understand what Aunt Pole and Belgarath meant in their use of the word talent. There seemed to be some kind of capacity, a limit beyond which most sorcerers could not go. Garion realized with a certain surprise that he was already stronger than men who had been practicing this art for centuries, and that he was only beginning to touch the edges of his talent. The thought of what he might eventually be able to do was more than a little frightening. It did, however, make him feel somewhat more secure. He straightened in his saddle and rode a bit more confidently. Perhaps leadership wasn't so bad after all. It took some getting used to, but once you knew what you were doing, it didn't seem all that hard. What's that saying about pride and what it cometh before? The next attack came as the eastern horizon had begun to grow pale behind them. I know nobody's replied, but I was thinking as answer to my question. Pride cometh before a small party or flock of birds, especially partridge. He's on his high horse, yes. Somehow I don't think that's the same, though. The next attack came as the eastern horizon had begun to grow pale behind them. Aunt Pole, her horse, and the little boy all seemed to vanish as absolute blackness engulfed them. Garion struck back instantly, and he added a contemptuous little twist to it, a stinging slap at the joined minds that had mounted the attack. He felt a glow of self-satisfaction at the surprise and pain in the minds as they flinched back from his quick counterblow. There was a glimpse, just a momentary one, of 9 very old men in black robes seated around a table in a room somewhere. One of the walls of the room had a large crack in it, and part of the ceiling had collapsed as a result of the earthquake that had convulsed Rakthol. 8 of the evil-looking old men looked surprised and frightened. The 9th one had fainted. The darkness surrounding Aunt Pole disappeared. "What are they doing?" Silk asked him. "They're trying to break through Aunt Pole's shield," Garion replied. "I gave them something to think about." He felt a little smug about it. Silk looked at him. His eyes narrowed shrewdly. "Don't overdo things, Garion," he advised. "Somebody had to do something," Garion protested. That's usually the way it works out. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't lose your perspective. The broken wall of peaks that marked the western edge of the wasteland was clearly visible as the light began to creep up the eastern sky. How far would you say it is? Garion asked Dernick. The smith squinted at the mountains ahead. 2 or 3 leagues at least, he judged. Distances are deceiving in this kind of light.
Well,
Barak asked.
do we take cover for the day here, or do we make a run for it?
Garion thought about that. Are we going to change direction as soon as we get to the mountains? He asked Mandaralin. 'Twould seem better, mayhap, to continue our present course for some little distance first, the knight replied thoughtfully. A natural boundary such as that which lies ahead might attract more than passing scrutiny. That's a good point, Silk agreed. Garion scratched at his cheek, noticing that his whiskers had begun to sprout again. Maybe we should stop here, then, he suggested. We could start out again when the sun goes down, get up into the mountains away, and then rest. When the sun comes up tomorrow morning, we can change our route. That way, we'll have light enough to see any tracks we leave and cover them up.
Seems like a good plan,
Barak approved. Let's do it that way, then, Garion decided. They sought out another ridge and another ravine, and once again concealed it with their tent canvas. Although he was tired, Garion was reluctant to lose himself in sleep. Not only did the cares of leadership press heavily on him, but he also felt apprehensive about the possibility of an attack by the hierarchs coming while he was asleep. As the others began to unroll their blankets, he walked about rather aimlessly, stopping to look at Aunt Pole, who sat with her back against a large rock, holding the sleeping errand and looking at as distant as the moon behind her shimmering shield. That's rough, buddy. Garion sighed and went on down to the mouth of the ravine, where Dernick was attending to the horses. It had occurred to him that all their lives depended on the well-being of their mounts, and that gave him something else to worry about. How are they? He asked Dernick as he approached. They're bearing up fairly well, Dernick replied. They've come a long way, though, and it's beginning to show on some of them. Is there anything we can do for them? A week's rest in good pasture, perhaps, Dernick answered with a wry smile. Garion laughed. I think we could all use a week's rest in a good pasture. You've really grown, Garion, Dernick observed as he lifted another horse's hind hoof to examine it for cuts or bruises. Garion glanced at his arm and saw that his wrist stuck an inch or two out of his sleeve. Most of my clothes still fit, pretty much, he replied. That's not the way I meant, Dernick hesitated. What's it like, Garion? Being able to do things the way you do. It scares me, Dernick, Garion admitted quietly. I didn't really want any of this, but it didn't give me any choice. You mustn't let it frighten you, you know, Dernick said, carefully lowering the horse's hoof. If it's part of you, it's part of you. Just like being tall or having blonde hair. It's not really like that, Dernick. Being tall or having blonde hair doesn't hurt anybody. This can. Dernick looked out at the long shadows of the ridge stretching away from the newly risen sun. You just have to learn to be careful with it, that's all. When I was about your age, I found out that I was much stronger than the other young men in our village, probably because I worked in the smithy. I didn't want to hurt anybody, so I wouldn't wrestle with my friends. One of them thought I was a coward because of that, and he pushed me around for about 6 months, until I finally lost my temper. Did you fight him? Dernick nodded. It wasn't really much of a contest. After it was over, he realized that I wasn't a coward after all. We even got to be good friends again, after his bones all healed up and he got used to the missing teeth. Garion grinned at him, and Dernick smiled back a bit ruefully. I was ashamed of myself afterward, of course. Oh, believe me, I have. Garion felt very close to this plain, solid man. Dernick was his oldest friend, somebody he could always count on. What I'm trying to say, Garion, Dernick continued seriously, is that you can't go through life being afraid of what you are. If you do that, sooner or later somebody'll come along who'll misunderstand, and you'll have to do something to show him that it's not him you're afraid of. When it goes that far, it's usually much worse for you. And for him, too. The way it was with Asherak? Dernick nodded. It's always best in the long run to be what you are. It isn't proper to behave as if you were more, but it isn't good to behave as if you were less, either. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? The whole problem seems to be finding out just exactly what you really are, Garion observed. Dernick smiled again. That's the part that gets most of us in trouble at times, he agreed. Suddenly, the smile fell away from his face, and he gasped. Then he fell writhing to the ground, clutching at his stomach. Dernick! Garion cried. What's wrong? But Dernick could not answer. His face was ashen and contorted with agony as he twisted in the dirt. Garion felt a strange, alien pressure, and he understood instantly. Thwarted in their attempts to kill Erend, the hierarchs were directing their attacks at the others, in the hope of forcing Aunt Pole to drop her shield. A terrible rage boiled up in him. His blood seemed to burn, and a fierce cry came to his lips. Calmly. It was the voice within his mind again. What do I do? Get out into the sunlight. Garion did not understand that, but he ran out past the horses into the pale morning light. Put yourself into your shadow. He looked down at the shadow stretching out on the ground in front of him, and obeyed the voice. He wasn't sure exactly how he did it, but he poured his will and his awareness into the shadow. Now, follow the trail of their thought back to them, quickly. Garion felt himself suddenly flying. Enclosed in his shadow, he touched the still writhing Dernick once, like a sniffing hound, picked up the direction of the concerted thought that had felled his friend, and then flashed through the air back over the miles of wasteland toward the wreckage of Rak Kthul. He had, it seemed, no weight, and there was an odd purplish cast to everything he saw. He felt his immensity as he entered the room with the cracked wall where the 9 black-robed old men sat, trying with the concerted power of their minds to kill Dernick. Their eyes were all focused on a huge ruby, nearly the size of a man's head, which lay flickering in the center of the table around which they sat. The slanting rays of the morning sun had distorted and enlarged Garion's shadow, and he filled one corner of the room, bending slightly so that he could fit under the ceiling. What were you saying, Sharky? Ever heard of low ceilings?
Stop!
He roared at the evil old men.
Leave Dernick alone!
They flinched back from his sudden apparition, and he could feel the thought that they were directing at Dernick through the stone on the table falter and begin to fall apart. He took a threatening step and saw them cringe away from him in the purple light that half clouded his vision. Then one of the old men, very thin and with a long dirty beard and completely hairless scalp, seemed to recover from his momentary fright.
Stand firm! He snapped at the others. Keep the thought on the Sendar! Leave him alone!
Garion shouted at them.
Who says so?
The thin old man drawled insultingly.
I do. And just who are you? I am Belgarion. Leave my friends alone.
The old man laughed, and his laugh was as chilling as Katuchik's had been.
Actually, you're only Belgarion's shadow, he corrected. We know the trick of the shadow. You can talk and bluster and threaten, but that's all you can do. You're just a powerless shade, Belgarion. Leave us alone! And what will you do if we don't?
The old man's face was filled with contemptuous amusement. Is he right? Garion demanded of the voice within his mind. Perhaps. Perhaps not, the voice replied. A few men have been able to go beyond the limitation. You won't know unless you try. Despite his dreadful anger, Garion did not want to kill any of them.
Ice,
he said, focusing on the idea of cold and lashing out with his will. It felt odd, almost tenuous, as if it had no substance behind it, and the roaring was hollow and puny sounding. The bald old man sneered and waggled his beard insultingly. What does that mean? I'm pretty sure the dwarves did that in The Hobbit as well, didn't they? Hey, Belgarion, what are you gonna do? I'm sorry, I hope that wasn't too insulting for everyone. I'm glad I don't think you guys know how to clip things. Why, I never. Might have more threat to it with a danglier beard. Yeah, that's true. Mine isn't that long. I do waggle my beard at you. Wait, hang on. If I say yes, will I get in trouble? Yes. No, sir, I do not waggle my beard at you, sir, but I do waggle my beard, sir. It's that way. Just waggling it in general. Where was I? Before I got distracted by beard waggling. The beard waggling in The Hobbit, it's like it's already The Hobbit. It's a little silly at times. It's a little goofy at times, so it kind of fit. But this is like a tense situation where Dernick might die. So it feels slightly out of place. Okay. Alright. The bald old man sneered and waggled his beard insultingly. Garion ground his insubstantial teeth and drew himself in with a dreadful concentration. Beard! Beard! What? Beard! Oh boy. Okay. Garion ground his insubstantial teeth and drew himself in with dreadful concentration. "Burn!" he said then, driving his will. There was a flicker, and then a sudden flash. The force of Garion's will burst forth, directed not at the bald man himself, but rather at his whiskers. The hierarch jumped up and stumbled back with a hoarse exclamation, trying desperately to beat the flames out of his beard. Beard! The concerted thought of the hierarchs shattered as the rest of them scrambled to their feet in terrified astonishment. Much less effectively, that's for sure, as we've established. Grimly, Garion gathered his swelling will and began to lay about him with his immensely long arms. He tumbled the hierarchs across the rough stone floor and slammed them into walls. Squealing with fright, they scurried this way and that, trying to escape, but he methodically reached out and grasped them, one by one, to administer his chastisement. With a peculiar kind of detachment, he even stuffed one of them headfirst into the crack in the wall, pushing quite firmly until only a pair of wriggling feet were sticking out. I will admit, this whole scene is feeling very much more like something out of The Hobbit. That's Then, when it was done, he turned back to the bald hierarch, who had managed, finally, to beat the last of the fire out of his beard.
"It's impossible! Impossible!"
the hierarch protested, his face stunned.
"How did you do it?"
"I told you, I am Belgarion. I can do things you can't even imagine." "The jewel," the voice told him. "They're using the jewel to focus their attacks. Destroy it." "How?" "It can only hold so much. Look." Garion suddenly found that he could actually see into the interior of the still flickering ruby on the table. He saw the minute stress lines within its crystalline structure, and then he understood. He turned his will on it and poured all his anger into it. The stone blazed with light and began to pulsate as the force within it swelled. Then, with a sharp detonation, the stone exploded into fragments.
"No!"
the bald hierarch wailed.
"You idiot! That stone was irreplaceable!"
"Listen to me, old man," Garion said in an awful voice. "You will leave us alone. You will not pursue us or try to injure any of us any more." He reached out with his shadowy hand and slid it directly into the bald man's chest. He could feel the heart flutter like a terrified bird, and the lungs falter as the hierarch's breath stopped, and he gaped with horror at the arm sticking out of his chest. Garion slowly opened his fingers very wide. "Do you understand me?" he demanded. The hierarch gurgled and tried to take hold of the arm, but his fingers found nothing to grasp. "Do you understand me?" Garion repeated, and suddenly clenched his fist. The hierarch screamed. "Are you going to leave us alone?"
"Please, Belgarion, no more! I'm dying!"
"Are you going to leave us alone?" Garion demanded again.
Yes, anything! But please stop! I beg you! I'll do anything, please!"
Garion unclenched his fist and drew his hand out of the hierarch's heaving chest. He held it up, claw-like, directly in front of the old man's face. "Look at this and remember it," he said in a dreadfully quiet voice. "Next time I'll reach into your chest and pull your heart out." The hierarch shrank back, his eyes filled with horror as he stared at the awful hand.
"I promise you," he stammered. "I promise."
"Your life depends on it," Garion told him, then turned and flashed back across the empty miles toward his friends. Quite suddenly he was standing at the mouth of the ravine, staring down at his shadow slowly reforming on the ground before him. The purple haze was gone. Strangely enough, he didn't even feel tired. Dernick drew in a shuddering breath and struggled to rise. Garion turned quickly and ran back to his friend. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking hold of the smith's arm.
"It was like a knife twisting inside me,"
Dernick replied in a shaking voice.
"What was it?"
"The Grolim hierarchs were trying to kill you," Garion told him. Dernick looked around, his eyes frightened. "Don't worry, Dernick. They won't do it again." Garion helped him to his feet, and together they went back into the ravine. Aunt Pole was looking directly at him as he approached her. Her eyes were penetrating. "You're growing up very fast," she said to him. "I had to do something," he replied. "What happened to your shield?" "It doesn't seem to be necessary anymore."
"Not bad,"
Belgarath said. The old man was sitting up. He looked weak and drawn, but his eyes were alert.
"Some of it was a bit exotic, but on the whole, it wasn't bad at all. The business with the hand was just a little overdone, though."
"I wanted to be sure he understood that I meant what I was saying." Garion felt a tremendous wave of relief at his grandfather's return to consciousness.
"I think you convinced him,"
Belgarath said dryly.
"Is there anything to eat somewhere nearby?"
he asked Aunt Pole. "Are you all right now, grandfather?" Garion asked him.
"Aside from being as weak as a fresh-hatched baby chick, and as hungry as a she-wolf with 9 puppies, I'm just fine," Belgarath replied. "I could really use something to eat, Polgara."
"I'll see what I can find, father," she told him, turning to the packs.
"I don't know that you need to bother cooking it," he added.
The little boy had been looking curiously at Garion, his wide, blue eyes serious and slightly puzzled. Quite suddenly he laughed, smiling. Smiling, he looked into Garion's face. "Belgarion," he said. That's the end of chapter 3. There was a lot in that chapter, wasn't there? I feel like there were some pretty portentous events that took place. Garion intentionally, repeatedly using the will and the word. Giant shadow arms. Yeah. That was a weird scene, wasn't it? A bit Muppetish. I mean, you can see like how it started as a serious scene and ended as a serious scene, but that middle bit, like, it was all set up, right? He went and stood in the morning sunlight, so his shadow is all big and stretched out. And then he sends his shadow to that room, and as a result of the way it looked on the ground, now it's in that room all big and stretched out, and I'm gonna get you. Grab this guy and stuff him in the wall. It was, yeah, a little dreamlike, I guess. I don't know. Mr. Sharky's had a dream like that before. Yeah, dreamlike. I think feels correct to me. Like that's how it felt to me. Hmm. Yeah, I can see that too. Has Mrs. Sharkey rejoined us? Or joined us? Or is the survey ongoing? Wait, actually, you mentioned a while back, didn't you? Did you? I remember you saying you were getting settled, but I didn't know if that meant that she was back. She did join partway through. So, what was that noise? Ben, what are you up to? So yeah, I feel like a lot happened in that chapter. We had Garion actually engage in a sword fight. Has he ever used a sword on anyone before? He's drawn it before, but has he ever actually had to fight with a sword before now? Ben, what are you doing? You okay? Oh, I think he's maybe feeling a little sick. Okay, what do we do? Should we give him some paper towel or something? Sorry, puppy looks like he's not feeling very well. I'm just gonna mute for just a moment. Sorry about that. Puppy has not been sick, but he looks like he's not feeling super well, so we'll see. We'll see. Sometimes he, just needs to get something out. That hasn't happened, but yeah. So as I was saying, um, we had Garion engage in an actual fight with Emergo, um, using his sword and apparently being at least somewhat skilled. Got some praise from Mandaralin. And an interesting description, the pointing out the result of his learning to fight with all these different people that are all from different places with different styles and things like that, and having that actually have a noticeable result within Garion is pretty interesting, I thought, because he's been traveling with Petar, Silk, Barak, Mandaralin, who are all... Silk doesn't seem to actually use swords very much. He more often has knives that he uses. There is Relg, but that's not how Relg fights. And he's definitely trained with at least, a few of them. Okay. You feeling okay now, Ben? You feeling okay? Is your tummy settled a little bit? It's okay, pup. It's okay. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting outcome, I think. I like that bit about, that getting pointed out, that, hey, he has been training with an Algarian and Mimbrate Erend and Cherek, and that's all coming together to, possibly he's been training with the Draznian. It's all coalescing into something new and difficult to deal with. And I liked that conversation with Dernick that he had. I feel like that's kind of the most we've had Dernick speak on a subject for quite a while. But that was a nice moment, even if it ended in a bad way. Dernick actually talking about his youth a little bit. Yeah. So that was cool too. And then, of course, big Shadow Garion smash. And now Belgrath's awake again, and I'm going to have to relearn his voice. I was trying to have him sound a little weak here because obviously he's a little weak here. So it's only 20 after 8. So what do people think? Are you up for another chapter? We learned a new collective noun. Covey. A covey of partridges. Pride cometh before a covey. Okay. That's fine with me. I should probably take this pup to do a lap around the neighborhood. Sharkies are thinking of calling it a night. It looks like our friend Slightly Stupid Bear is actually playing Warhammer Vermintide 2, which is a game I'm somewhat familiar with. Friends of mine have played quite a lot of that. So I think I'll start a raid over to him, and you can see him play a fantasy game where you kill anthropomorphic rats. And yeah, I'll be back here hopefully next Wednesday, which would be, in theory, the second last stream before I have a week off. Assuming, all of this is assuming that, we don't sell our house tomorrow or something like that, in which case, who knows what's going to happen. But, yeah. Have a good weekend, everyone. Try to rest and relax a little if you can. BBAB if you're still around. Good luck with the new stray. And hopefully I'll either see you all next Wednesday or I'll try and let you know that I won't be able to. Thank you very much. All right. Good night, everyone. Go say hi to Bear. Is it not? There we go.